He didn't lose it all overnight. But piece by piece his business, his home, his family, everything crumbled under the weight of nearly $400,000 in debt. There were no second chances, no miracle mentors, no lottery wins. Just silence. Cold nights. And the decision to walk through the wreckage, one honest step at a time. This is the true-to-life story of a man who faced ruin not with rage or glory but with quiet endurance. No fame. No fortune. Just freedom. Earned the hard way. The letter arrived in a plain white envelope. No logo. No return address. Just his name, Miles Brennan, printed in thick, unforgiving ink. He already knew what it was. The kind of knowledge that lived not in the mind, but in the gut. Like the cold that crept in under the doorframe of his tiny apartment, the truth had already made itself at home. He opened it anyway. Notice of legal default, case no. 4827, BR. The undersigned creditor has filed a formal claim in pursuit of collection of debt amounting to $274,219.18, including accrued interest and penalties. You are hereby notified. He stopped reading. The words blurred into a gray fog. He folded the paper back along its original crease, set it neatly on the cracked kitchen counter, and stared at the wall. There was a water stain in the shape of a sickle above the stove. It had been there since he moved in. Somehow, it felt appropriate. $274,219.18. And that was just one of the creditors. It hadn't always been this way. 3 years ago, Miles ran a modest but respected digital printing studio. Logos, posters, packaging, indie books, his machines hummed all day in a converted garage off Roosevelt Avenue. He had 2 employees, a decent line of credit, and a reputation for being quietly dependable. Then the pandemic came. Then the cancellations. Then the loans. Then the silence. He tried to keep the shop alive for 6 months after the shutdown. Burned through savings. Took out personal loans. Co-signed for a business partner who bailed without a word. By the time he closed the garage for good, he owed more than he'd ever earned in any single year of his life. Miles sat on the edge of his bed, which doubled as a couch, and let the silence spread. He was 39 years old. Divorced. No kids he could afford to visit. No car. No house. Just an apartment he was 3 weeks behind on, and a freezer with a single bag of rice and a bottle of mustard. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He didn't answer. He never answered anymore. That evening, he took inventory. Not of money, there wasn't any, but of hours. 3 hours left on his night shift at the packaging warehouse. 2 hours of rest before the snow shoveling job started at 5 a.m. 1 hour on foot between shifts. 18 minutes to heat rice and stare at the wall before leaving. He used to measure time in goals. Deadlines. Launch dates. Now it was just survival. Miles didn't dream of becoming rich. He didn't crave a comeback. He just wanted to stop feeling like he was drowning in silence. Before leaving, he grabbed his worn jacket and pulled the sleeves over his wrists. The lining was torn. It had once been a birthday gift, from a different life. He looked at the folded notice one last time. Legal default. It sounded like a machine term. A programming glitch. Something easily reset. But for him, it was a verdict. A stamp on the remainder of his life. Still, he picked up his gloves, locked the door, and walked into the cold. Because debt might own his past, but it didn't get to decide his next step. Not tonight. The air cut through his jacket like he wasn't wearing anything at all. At 4:57 a.m., the sidewalk was an endless stretch of salt-stained concrete, punctuated by flickering streetlights and the occasional pile of dirty snow. Miles tightened the scarf around his neck and pushed the snow shovel deeper into the frozen slush in front of the bakery's entrance. This was his first job of the day, clearing storefronts for $9.50 an hour, cash only, no questions asked. His fingers had gone numb 20 minutes ago. He didn't stop. Behind the glass, the bakery owner flicked on the lights, warm golden halos spilling onto trays of untouched croissants. The owner looked at Miles once, gave a short nod, and walked away without a word. That was the whole transaction. By 7:15 a.m., Miles had cleared 3 storefronts and the alley behind a Korean grocery. He sat on a cold bench near the bus stop, eating half a protein bar he found in the bottom of his bag. It had expired last November. The other half, he kept for later. His phone buzzed. This time, he looked. Balance due, $402,738.91. Account in collections. Immediate action required. He stared at it, then locked the screen. By 9 a.m., he was clocked in at the packaging plant. Row after row of cardboard boxes, assembly line tempo, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. He worked the 12-hour shift in the fold and seal section, monotonous, repetitive, backbreaking. No talking allowed. Music not permitted. Only the sound of folding and taping, like the factory was chewing through time and workers alike. The foreman walked past him twice, eyes scanning like a prison guard. Miles knew he was watching for signs of fatigue. If your hands slowed, you were pulled off rotation. Too many slowdowns, you were gone. At lunch, he sat alone. There were chairs around, but no one joined him. Most of the younger guys were half his age and didn't make eye contact. Some spoke Spanish or Polish, others just stared into their phones. Miles ate quietly. Cold rice and a boiled egg. By 10:40 p.m., his second job ended. He had walked nearly 23,000 steps according to his old step counter, though the screen was cracked, and it often froze. His body ached, especially his knees and lower back. The kind of ache that wasn't sharp, just constant. Like his bones were protesting every movement but too tired to scream. Back in his apartment, the heating unit clicked on and off, unable to keep up with the outside wind. He undressed slowly, peeled off the damp socks, and stared at the ceiling. He didn't cry. He didn't curse. He just laid there, a man with no savings, no assets, and over $400,000 in debt, falling asleep with tomorrow's alarm already set. Somewhere in the blur between consciousness and sleep, one thought echoed in his head. I can't outwork this debt, but I can outlast it. He didn't know if it was true, but it was enough to get up again tomorrow. Miles didn't hear his alarm. The sound was there, shrill, insistent, but his brain filtered it out like a mosquito hum in the background of a fever dream. When he finally opened his eyes, it was already light outside. He sat up too fast and the room tilted. His heartbeat stuttered, not from panic, but from something deeper, an emptiness in the tank. He hadn't eaten dinner the night before. Just water. There hadn't been time. Or maybe he'd simply forgotten. The shifts were bleeding into one another, hours leaking from his memory like a sieve. He checked the clock. 8:13 a.m. He had missed both snow-clearing routes and the morning delivery shift. That meant losing about $92 he had been counting on to cover his electricity bill. A cold dread spread in his chest, not fear, not shame, just the sensation of sinking again. By 9 a.m., he was at the convenience store across from his building, hands shaking as he bought a banana and a bottle of electrolyte drink. The cashier looked him over, filthy work jacket, graying stubble, shadows under the eyes. You okay, man? She asked, not kindly, just curiously. Miles gave a nod he didn't mean. He walked outside, sat on the curb, ate half the banana, then felt nauseous. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the cracked pavement beneath his boots. And then everything went white. The next thing he saw was fluorescent light, a curtain, and a quiet beep. Hospital. He blinked, dazed. A nurse stood beside him. Older. Calm. You passed out outside a gas station. Mild hypoglycemia, exhaustion, dehydration, she said without looking up from the chart. How many hours do you sleep a night? Miles thought for a moment. 2. Maybe 3. She clicked her pen. You can't keep doing that. I have to. No. You don't understand. I'm not giving you advice. I'm telling you your body's about to quit on you. Heart failure. Neurological collapse. Pick a term. He looked away. She softened. Do you have anyone to call? No. They let him go that evening. No insurance. No overnight stay. Just a warning sheet and 2 aspirin samples in a plastic bag. He walked home slowly, body still shaky. In his apartment, the window was open a crack, letting in icy air. He didn't remember leaving it open. He closed it. Sat on the edge of the bed. Stared at the eviction notice taped to the inside of the door. It had been delivered while he was out. 3 weeks left. Maybe less. He didn't cry. He didn't punch the wall. He just lay there, flat on his back, hands resting on his chest. He thought about the debt, not the number, but what it had done to his life. How it had turned work into punishment, time into threat, and silence into screaming. Then, somewhere deep beneath the exhaustion and hunger and bitterness, a question rose to the surface. If I die tomorrow, will anyone even know I tried? The answer, of course, was no. But then again, he hadn't been doing this for recognition. He was doing it because quitting meant becoming exactly what they expected him to be, a broken man with nothing left. And Miles wasn't broken yet. Bent? Absolutely. But not broken. He stood. Slowly. Quietly. Pulled out a notebook he hadn't touched in months. Wrote one line. Plan B, survive smarter. Not harder. The notebook was cheap. Spiral bound. Its cover was dented, and a coffee stain curled across the top like a burned map. Miles had bought it 2 years ago, back when he still believed in vision planning. Back when he'd filled the first pages with revenue targets, branding ideas, and team-building quotes. Now he turned to the back of the notebook blank, unromantic, and wrote a new title. Exit Plan, Quiet Version. He stared at it for a moment. Then drew a line under the words. Then another. The next day, Miles didn't go to work. Not because he had the luxury of resting, but because he finally realized, working himself into the ground was killing him faster than the debt was. He spent the morning going over everything he owned. A used Android phone with a cracked screen. A half-functioning laptop from the print shop days. 3 work jackets. 1 pair of winter boots with a split sole. A single mug. A kettle. 2 bowls. He listed everything unnecessary on a local classifieds app. Within hours, he had $147 in hand. That afternoon, he went to the library. Not to look for hope, but for information. He read quietly in the back corner, debt consolidation laws, insolvency procedures, budgeting on extreme poverty, minimalism that didn't come with Instagram filters. He wasn't interested in inspiration. He was looking for systems. He drew his own. He called it reboot mode. No motivation. No self-help jargon. Just rules. Rule 1, no more 3 job days. They weren't sustainable. They weren't efficient. They cost more in food, transit, and health than they earned. Rule 2, track every cent. He bought a single-page ledger from the dollar store. No apps. No automation. Just pen and paper. Rule 3, eat to function, not to feel. 1 cooked meal a day. 2 if he was under physical strain. No sugar. No caffeine. Rule 4, rest is part of repayment. Without sleep, his decisions were sloppy. And sloppy cost money. Rule 5, eliminate the noise. No social media. No news scrolls. No comparing himself to people who didn't carry $400,000 of dead weight. He didn't tell anyone. There was no one to tell. But each day, he followed the system. No matter how tired. No matter how little it seemed to matter. Within 2 weeks, the swelling in his ankles went down. His breathing steadied. The panic attacks disappeared. By the end of the month, he had paid down $243 on a high-interest loan. Bought a space heater to replace the broken one. Cooked 26 meals at home. Slept 6 hours or more for 19 nights. Said no to 14 spam calls. No one clapped. No one noticed. But on the 30th day, he sat on the floor of his apartment with a cup of warm lentil soup, looked at his spreadsheet, and whispered aloud for no one to hear. "I'm not drowning this week." It wasn't a victory. But it was the first time he had felt even with the world in months. February came with more snow. It blanketed the streets like silence, muting the city's usual clatter into a dull hush. For most people, it was just another winter. For Miles, it was another 30 days of staying above zero not temperature, but debt momentum. He had begun to track his progress with a single number at the top of his wall calendar. Amount owed. Each night, after brushing his teeth, he would update it with a red pen. Some days, it dropped by only $5.12. Other days, it stayed the same. But it never went up. He now worked only 2 jobs, evenings at the library as a part-time janitor, and weekend shifts unloading at a warehouse. Less money overall, but more control. More room to think, to breathe, to stretch his back without hearing it crack. He took his breaks behind the library's boiler room. It was warm, quiet. He would eat a simple sandwich and read borrowed books. Not fiction. Not escape. Just facts, tax law, slow finance, human behavior under stress. He had no illusions. The math was brutal. At this rate, it would take him over 14 years to pay off the full $400,000. But for the first time in years, that number didn't crush him. It didn't float above his head like a storm cloud. It sat beside him, heavy but still. A weight, not a wave. One day, at the end of a shift, the library manager stopped him. "You used to work in design, right?" she asked. He hesitated. "Yes. We've got a few old terminals in the back that need formatting. Some layout work, too. Nothing fancy. Interested?" He was. But he didn't show it. "Sure," he said, voice flat. That Friday, he stayed 2 hours longer. Cleaned the hard drives. Rebuilt a template for their flyers. Fixed a busted printer that had been blinking for weeks. She handed him a $50 gift card and a thank you note. It wasn't much. But it was the first time in 2 years that someone paid him for his mind, not just his body. In March, he made his first real dent. White heavy checkmark paid off one full loan, $1,184.64 in total. It had taken months, but the moment he crossed it off his spreadsheet, he sat back and let himself smile, not because the debt was gone, but because something was finished. In a life full of unfinished things, this one meant something. He didn't post about it. Didn't tell anyone. He just bought a small cup of hot chocolate, walked 3 extra blocks to avoid the busy road, and drank it in silence. That weekend, his ex-wife called. They hadn't spoken since the final court hearing. "I heard through a friend that you're doing okay," she said, unsure. "I'm surviving." Long pause. "Our son's turning 10 next month." "I know. She hesitated. He said he misses you. I didn't know if I should tell you that. Miles didn't respond for a long time. Then, quietly, he said, tell him I'm not who I was. But I'm getting closer. That night, he went home and circled a date on the calendar, April 12th. It was payday. And if everything went right, he'd have just enough money for something new, not a payment, not food, not rent. A small box of art supplies. Pencils. Pens. Paper. He wasn't planning a return. Not trying to become someone again. He just wanted to remember who he used to be. And build from there. April arrived without fanfare. There were no blossoms yet, just wet sidewalks and the sound of thaw. The kind of weather where winter still lingered, but something softer moved beneath it. On April 12th, Miles did what he said he would. He walked into a small art store near the university and bought a basic sketching kit. Nothing fancy. Just a few graphite pencils, a kneaded eraser, and a pad of thick paper. It cost him $18.76. He counted the bills slowly at the counter. The young man behind the register didn't flinch. Didn't judge. Just handed him a small brown bag and said, "Good luck, man." Miles nodded. "Yeah. You too." That night, he sat at his kitchen table, the same scratched, second-hand table he'd eaten countless bowls of lentils on, and began to draw. Not for work. Not for money. Not for anyone but himself. His lines were shaky. His hand ached from the warehouse. But the muscle memory was still there, the eye for balance, the instinct for space, the quiet thrill of turning blankness into something. He drew for 22 minutes before his body gave in to sleep. But when he woke the next morning, the sketch pad was still there. Waiting. May came. Then June. He paid off another loan, this one smaller. He fixed a neighbor's broken printer for $20. He got a part-time evening job teaching beginner-level design at the community center 2 hours, twice a week. He still owed over $360,000. But he no longer lived in fear of the number. One Friday afternoon, the library manager offered him a small office in the back. "It's not much," she said, "but it's yours if you want it. For tutoring, maybe. Or just to draw." Miles stood in the doorway that evening, looking at the dusty desk, the single window, the unplugged lamp. He didn't say yes right away. But he cleaned the place. Opened the window. Plugged in the lamp. Sometimes accepting space is harder than fighting for it. By late summer, he had built a new rhythm. Weekday evenings, janitorial shift at the library. Saturdays, warehouse deliveries. Sundays, off. Always off. For walking. Drawing. Letters. Books. Stillness. He had a savings envelope. Not a bank account yet. Just an envelope in a drawer with a handwritten label. Emergency equals not giving up. Inside was $213. It wasn't much. But it was the first time he'd had more than zero in nearly 4 years. He didn't call his ex-wife again. But he did send a birthday card to his son. Inside, he wrote, "I'm not there yet. But I'm walking back. One honest step at a time. Dad." He didn't know if the boy would read it. But he wrote it anyway. Because words, like lives, needed to be rebuilt too. The final line in his notebook written on a quiet Sunday in September was simple. "Debt didn't kill me. Silence almost did. But I made it out. On foot." Then he closed the notebook and got back to work.